when he talks about this is the curriculum is never watered down. However, sometimes he is full of shit. So look through that, but
Did you get that, Kathleen?
Did you just come up with that, or
I
did you
thought
write
about
it
that
down?
when I was driving in this morning. I was just
We're up all night.
I was. So
You're here all week?
Thank you, Ted.
Okay. No, part of the reason that we're doing this is recently I've gotten a lot of questions from people asking about different things about wells and septics. And usually that's an indication that we have enough need to do this again. And I asked Mike and he said, oh, certainly. So, a little background, I'm on my second house out in the country that's on a well and septic. My first one actually was on propane in addition. I actually have natural gas line now. So I have a source of heat that can be turned off. When you have propane, it's up to you. Of course, if the truck can't get in and fill it up, so. But wells and septics, we're gonna start with septics first. Because with a well and septic, you're pulling water out of the ground and ultimately it's going back into the ground in various forms. So the septic is the one that you're gonna run into some places, even when they have communities out east that have centralized water, they still have septic systems. Latigo's one, what is the other one out east? Is it Antelope Estates or something? They have a centralized water system where they have a community well and they provide the water to people, but you still have to have a septic. So just because you have water to the property doesn't necessarily mean that you don't have a septic system. And what the county calls it is a OWTS, on-site wastewater treatment system, because there's more than just septics. There's cesspools, there's other type of things. Cesspools, you really got to talk to me about those. Very few of them out there because it has to be pumped more often. It's just a giant tank that you go and it goes into the tank. A septic system has got a tank. All of the wastewater from your house flows into one side of the tank. It's got a baffle in it. And their thought is most of the solids are going to fall off in the bottom of that first chamber of the tank. Then the liquids will go over the top. Then they come up to a certain point. They go out a pipe and it goes out into a leach field, which is a bunch of fingers out into the property where it's absorbed down into the ground. Mother Nature takes care of it. Several hundred feet down, it's back into the water table. So that's why you want your septic system to be here and your well to be way over there. Because you don't want that going down here. Because you know what's in here, you don't want to be drinking it, okay? So El Paso and Pueblo counties require a transfer certificate. So if you're going to do a property, if you've got the seller, caution them, tell them you're gonna have to do this, but those certificates are only good for about 6 months. So you really don't wanna do that until you get a contract. Problem is, if you get a contract, it's a cash deal, true story. You got the certificate issued the morning of an afternoon closing, because it was a quick close. So you get on it right away. There is a list of people in the county's page that are certified inspectors. Not everybody can do it, okay? It's usually a cost to the seller, but we'll talk about in a competitive situation what a buyer can do on that. There's a charge for the certificate. There's a charge for the inspection. If you have the inspection done in conjunction with pumping, it's less expensive. If you've got the buyer, I would always suggest in the contract, you ask that the septic, you get the septic certificate, however you want to word it, seller is to perform, seller is to have the septic system pumped, inspected by certificate of transfer issued by the county health department.
That was way too fast.
Well, you write what you want. What you're wanting is that you're wanting it pumped, inspected, and a certificate issued. The only time that you would probably waive having it pumped is if they've already had it pumped in the last 6 months, 8 months, 9 months, somewhere in there. Cause you know what's in there. You know the stuff that's in there. I'd rather start without somebody else's stuff in there. I wanna put my stuff in there.
What's the recommended pumping time for a septic?
Depends, okay, I just had mine pumped after about 6 years, last year. Ours is a house, it's a 4-bedroom house, it was built, the system was set for a 5-bedroom because we had a place where we could finish another bedroom. So our system was sized for a 5-bedroom house. There's 2 of us there. Now my beloved wife will run just about anything down a garbage disposal, which you're really not supposed to do. The old days, the septic systems didn't have garbage disposals. They used non-chlorine washing materials and stuff, and they used a biodegradable toilet paper. Those things were bulletproof. Modern day, you use all kinds of OxyClean and stuff in there. You run stuff down the disposal. The worst thing is like peels, potato peels and all that. Run God knows what down the disposal. So they need to be more often. But they can tell, they come in and has anybody ever watched a septic tank being pumped? Yeah, they take the lid off and they have that thing, they start breaking the crust up.
It's gross. It's just gross.
Yes. But you know what, the crust is the toilet paper. So the toilet paper will tend to float to the top. So they bust up the toilet paper so they can suck it out. It's not a big deal. It's trouble. It's the same thing as doing a porta potty on a much larger basis. You know, so they do it all day.
Tad, are there companies that pump and inspect but don't do repairs?
Yes.
Okay.
In fact, you would probably want one to do that. Arrowhead is the one I started using years ago because they were the first one to jump on board. And there's a bunch of them, but they had early on like 6 or 8 inspectors approved by the county when they started that. They stopped doing repairs because they thought that was a conflict of interest. So if you have somebody that pumps, inspects, and repairs, what are the odds are that you're gonna find an error? Oh, we need to fix this. But what has come to light when the county started doing this, a significant percentage of the septic systems failed. They had not been properly maintained, people hadn't pumped them in 10 years, which has clogged up their leach fields. There was a significant amount of trouble with the first round of these. Now people are a little more cognizant of it, and we're not seeing the failure rate the
So,
same.
excuse me, Ted, so 10 years is too long,
Oh, yeah.
but tell me what is a good amount of time?
It depends again, you know, like our house, if we had 3 kids living there, you know, we wanna pump it more often. My neighbors, okay, perfect example, my neighbors, similar size house, similar size septic system, they pump theirs about every 3 years.
Every 3 years.
But they've got 3 kids at home. They have the grown kids and the grandkids come over every Thursday and Sunday for parties. I know because I see the cards. So their septic system gets a lot more use than ours with just 2 people and random people coming to visit. So that's why we went 6. They do about every 3 years.
Got it, thank you.
So it's the usage. And septic systems, the misconception is that septic systems are sized off of bathrooms. They're not. You can have a 3-bedroom house with 6 bathrooms and you got this size septic system. You can have a 6-bedroom house with 2 bathrooms, you got this one. Because the county assumes 2 people per bedroom. Those are the people that are putting stuff in the ground. So they size them based on the occupancy level of a house. And that's what you gotta work if you have a house it's got a septic system and unfinished basement, and 3 bedrooms up, nothing, they finish the basement, 2 bedrooms down. Was that septic system sized for the potential of 5 bedrooms? Or was it sized for the potential of 3?
So what are the sizes? I mean, are they by gallons or by
Yeah,
The size of the tank.
yeah, you have, 1,000-gallon tanks, you have 1,250,000, you have 1,500 gallons, you have, up to 2,000 gallons. After that, they get cumbersome. Ours has a 1,500, we could probably get by with a 1,250, but we wanted the bigger one. In the leach field. Leach fields, when you're doing your, first time you're doing one, they come out and do a soils and perk test. People, what's a perk test? It's the short for percolation. They drill a hole, they fill it full of water, and they see how long it takes to drain in. That shows the porosity of the soil and how quickly it will absorb the water. My system now would not, mine's a basic standard system. If I was to rebuild my system now, I'd have to have an engineered system, which means I have to dig down deeper, bring in sand, build my system up, and then build sand on top of it, which you'll see some of these were the mounds. That's an engineered system.
Are
Because
those
of-
required now, then, engineered?
A lot of them, unless you're on a real sandy soil. Because what they've learned with all of these certificates, how many are failing, what do we need to require for new systems? So they've tightened up their regulations of the systems.
So Ted, if you're looking on the other side then, as let's say you have a buyer that's looking and has a well on a lot, do you look around to see where other people's septic systems are and if that's
I would,
reaching into that by chance or?
yeah, because the guy here could have put his well on that side and his septic here. The guy on the next side could have put his well on the far, so you could have two septic systems sitting on your property line on both sides.
Mhm.
So you don't wanna do your well either one, and you don't want your well too close to the road. You don't want your well too far from the house, because in the country, every foot that you go, cha-ching.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You're running your water line from your well, but you're also running electricity out there.
Yep.
So you've gotta run the heavy 220 line out to the well and the water line back. And it's per foot. Every foot is a cha-ching, 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 cha-ching. That's why you see these 40-acre parcels in the house built up by the road, and you're like, why? You get all the dust. Well, if you set it back in the middle of property, it could cost you $10,000 to run your electric and everything back. So it's a cost. Plus, if you're gonna run livestock, you don't want all in your house. Because you know what they do. They don't do it in the septic system. If you need to find out where a septic system is, the county has permits for everything. And on the permits is a drawing. I believe they've got most of them now digitally. Carmen, you looked one up the other day.
Yeah.
I think most of them are digital now. In the old days, you had to go down there and get a copy. But they're digital. And it helps if you know where it is, because if the septic guys come out to pump it and it's covered, somebody's gotta dig down there. If the homeowner digs down and exposes the lids, there's two of them, there's one for each of the tanks. If the homeowner does it, it's cheaper. If they do it, it's so much an hour for their laborer to come out and dig that thing. So it adds to the price.
They
And they'll
usually
probably charge
has.
you for the machinery they use to dig it.
Shovel.
That's how they're done. Pick and a shovel. If you bring in heavy machinery, yeah. And we'll talk about septic tank prices down in the road in this thing. They're done by hand. They find out where they were and they dig down till and then they'll figure out where it is, and then they'll dig down to the.
How far down are they usually till you get to the cap?
Usually depends, 2 to 5 feet, depending on how they're dropping it. Most of them are 2-3 feet. Now when they do them, they're required to put risers. So in my yard, I have these 2 green discs about this big, pull them up, this corrugated pipe that goes down about this far, and then there's the lid. So you reach in with this little thing and you pull the lid out. You look down and you go, yeah, oh boy. But now we're gonna go to the part about bidding war on a house. And you think that your buyers could win out if they say, we're gonna take care of pumping the septic and getting the certificate issued. It's usual and customary for the seller to do it because the seller's giving you a clean septic system. You can waive that, but sure you let them know that there are pitfalls in there. It's an unknown. You don't know what's gonna happen. You're taking on that requirement. I don't know if the county is working with the assessor's office to see if a house is sold. Do they get a list of them? Do they look and see if that house got a certificate of transfer? And they're gonna come back to the buyer and say, you know what? You didn't transfer, you gotta get your septic system approved and transferred. So if you miss it, falls to the buyer, guess who the buyer's gonna come to? Yeah, okay? As Oliver used to say, when you sign that, you sign the line that doesn't say broker, it says co-defendant on there. So just personal experience in the last couple of years. Year before last, I had one that had a cracked tank. It's a vacant house. I had to go out and put water in it so they could, you know, it has to be full of water or stuff for them to do it, because they run water through, when they run their cameras through the leach field, they're flowing water through. I filled it up, they called me and said, you didn't fill the tank up. I said, yeah, I did, it's not. Went back out, filled it up again. They came out again. This was Arrowhead. And the little lady down at Arrowhead is the nicest lady. It doesn't have water in it. And I said, I filled it up twice. And then the guy that was doing it, he goes, uh-oh. I said, what do you mean, uh-oh? He got a cracked tank. He said, if you filled that up twice and you watched that, I said, I had the lids off and I watched both sides full and water's flowing. He goes, we got a crack. $3,500 to pull that tank out and put it back in. Plus it just mangled the backyard of this house because they're bringing in excavators and stuff. But to put a new tank in and everything's fine, and it passed, about $3,500.
So they can't repair any tanks, they have to just replace them?
Do you wanna go in there inside one of those tanks and start putting, okay, they don't either. Cause you could go in there and caulk them. I don't know what that guy would charge, I think a tank is cheaper than what that guy would charge.
Does the 3,500 include the tank or just the excavation?
No, that was the tank. Actually, the tanks are big concrete things. They're only about $1,200, $1,500.
Okay.
So they dig down, they put a chain on it, pull it out of the ground. They meanwhile brought a truck in with a tank on the back, and they set that beside when they put it on the,
So that was the whole total
that was only
cost?
$3,500.
Okay.
It was a 1,250 gallon tank. Had a house out towards Ellicott. The leach field, the terrain had changed and the water flowing across the property was different, and it was now flowing across the old leach field. Particularly wet year, it failed because it was soggy, wasn't percolating. So they had to put a diverter valve in. When you have this little handle and you turn it, instead of going over this old leach field, it goes over this one that's higher up. That was like $7,000 just to build this little leach field, and this house only had 3 bedrooms. It was a little modular. But the good news is, when they said when it dried out, every year they could switch the thing and they'd never have to worry about a leach field failing again.
How big is the leach field?
Depends on what the soils test says. Depends on the size of the bedrooms, size of the tank, and the soil conditions. They have a formula at the health department. Health department's pretty sticky about this. They come in, when they did mine, they come in, and they have a little GPS thing, so where are you gonna put your septic system? Right here. They set the GPS down, and they write that on the permit. We can only deviate, so if we moved it a certain distance, they come back to check. Okay, you're within the tolerances. But you don't wanna screw around with the guys when they tell you that. The worst one, this was High Forest Ranch about 3 years ago. It's a $900 and something thousand house. Big 5,000 square foot thing on 5 acres. Big leach field, 4 runs on the leach field. They were out having it serviced, inspected, pumped and inspected. They could get their camera down 3 of the runs of the leach field. Couldn't in the 4th. They brought in a rotor guys. They tried, they couldn't get through. So one of 3 things. 1, it backed up. 2, it collapsed on its own. Or 3, it could have been collapsed when they backfilled the original time. But nobody knew. So they had to go find another place to put the septic. Fairly treed lot. They didn't want to cut down too many trees. So they had to go a ways down from the other one down along where their driveway was, cut out a bunch of trees. If any of you have ever taken trees down, they're not cheap, because they don't just fall over and they don't just lay there. You gotta take them away. Say they take down a bunch of trees. Perk test said, oh, this needs to be an engineered system. 25 truckloads of sand later, they have a $41,000 new leach field. Thankfully, they had money in the house and they were able to afford to do that. But it was one of those things, once you got that far into it, what are you gonna do? It's already not noted as failed to the health department. It's gonna have to be fixed before you can sell it. And we sold the house at the upper part of the market,
Sorry, how much did you say that cost?
$41,000.
Oh my gosh.
They said they needed 25 truckloads of sand.
Yeah, I heard that.
Yeah.
So
Because they had to build
So
it.
that's
and that was
not
just
one of
leach
the
field.
worst case
That was just for the leach
Yeah, that
field.
was just the leach field.
Yeah,
So-
it was actually the septic tank for that house would have been probably about $5,000. They could almost redone the whole thing for under $45,000.
So my question though is, if that, I mean, that leach field didn't just fail, right? So the people that were living there, did they have problems?
No, I mean, they had kids that would come and stay and go, but it was a big enough leach field, it didn't need that fourth run.
Huh?
So that, like we said, that fourth run, it was either blocked or collapsed over the years, or even when they were installing it, when they were backfilling it, they crushed it.
So it
Or
wasn't
somebody
affecting
dro-
those people, but it still failed
It still failed.
them.
So
Okay.
so they couldn't just, block
That's
it
my,
off?
that was my question. Cut that off and put another one in? No.
Right.
No, just cut it off if they didn't need it.
Well, it was
determined on the size of the
The
house.
permit
Oh, 'cause of the-
required that size leach
house.
field, and they lost 25% of the leach field. And I asked the guys, can you just go in and go to the other side? He goes, we have to start over. So, be careful if you say,
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
you know, you can waive this. Be sure that your buyers know if they wanna waive it to get the house, there could be a big hit on the backside.
But they can't waive it, Ted. They can't
If they
waive
offer
it
to
until
pay
ask
it.
us
They can say that we'll take the
We'll take it
responsibility.
and get it
Right.
done during
Yeah,
the contract.
we'll pick
Yeah.
it up. You don't have to do it. We'll waive your responsibility. We'll take it on.
But that could be inspection items, right? Like you could even do the cleaning, certifying, but if there's an issue, can't you just ask for that in inspection?
No, they just, if you say that we want the septic system pumped, inspected, certified to be in safe, proper operating condition, and the accompanying health department transfer certificate issued, that's it.
Right,
But
but I'm
sometimes,
saying
You
like,
do that
a
in the
lot of times it comes
contract?
after
Yeah.
inspection, the pumping and the certifying comes after inspection,
Typically.
usually. 'Cause
Yeah.
then you know then the sellers know that the transaction's gonna move forward, or at least have more confidence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's usually after
Now
inspection,
you,
in my
plus-
experience.
but don't just,
So then if it
don't
fails,
just
you can't
depend
go
that you have a listing agent that knows what the hell they're doing.
Yeah.
You know, you put it in the contract, asking for that certificate. So if you do that, then they're stuck. If there's an issue, to issue the certificate over here,
Yeah.
they've gotta do the repair.
So
So if
it has,
you have a
yeah, if you have it in the
listing-
contract and they accept it,
Yeah, if they
then
don't,
they have to do
they-
it. If it turns into a negotiation thing, like in the inspection,
Yeah, they can say.
then they
"Oh,
can say, we'll pay for half, you'll pay for half.
So if you have a listing, should you just try to get the seller to go ahead and get that done up?
It's only good, for
6
6 months. You know, nowadays you're likely to be able to, sell a house in 6 months.
Yeah.
There was a time when houses in the country didn't sell that quick,
Yeah.
so you waited till they went under contract.
Okay.
But
But you should definitely make them aware, like, hey, this is
tell them
something
this
we're
is what you're
want.
gonna have to do. Oh, we just had it pumped, when? 2 summers ago. No,
Yeah, okay.
no.
Do you feel like that's kind of standard, practice for any county?
Only, right now, it's only for what, our near normal market area. El Paso and Pueblo require it. Tiller put it in a number of years ago, and oh, good grief. The country people, they were wanting to storm the castle and
Just the
Burn the
transferring
beast.
of title, but I mean like the pumping and inspecting on the sellers?
always ask for it.
Okay. Cause I had one in West Cliff and that listing agent like reamed me up and down for asking for that. And they're like, we don't do that here.
That happened to me in Teller County too. She made me take it out of the contract.
They're just cheap.
Did your clients go?
I have,
Mine terminated, they're like, we don't wanna deal with her.
Did your people just pay to have it done?
I've been in the business 26.5 years. For 26 years, I have asked the seller have the septic system pumped, inspected, and verified to be in safe, proper operating condition. I've not had a pushback yet. The one that said, well, we just had it done 6 months ago, and I said, perfect, send me the copy.
So is 6 months as far out as you would trust one being recently?
It depends. If you look at the house and it looks like there's, you know, the little old lady lives there by herself, I'd go a year.
Okay.
If you go in there and they've got 10 kids, I wouldn't trust 3 months.
Nothing.
But
They put everything in the toilet,
Yeah.
including
I
toys.
had one, this year that it was a young couple and the septic system was new. The house wasn't new, but the septic system was new. They'd only been there for a year and a half. We called to have someone come out and pump it because I told them they had to. And the pumping people said, there's not enough to pump. And if we tried to pump, cause then the buyers were like, well, we want like everything gone. And the pumping guy was like, I will damage the septic system if I try to pump. There's not enough in there.
Yeah.
For a year and a half?
Cause you need your bacteria and everything working.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh.
Because even when they pump, you know, I watch them. No, what about that? We can't get all that out. You don't want it all out. Okay. I want it out. But I'm not going down there and get it. The only system I ever saw that didn't need to be pumped on a regular basis was a hybrid system up in Divide. The house set right here, and it was on a centralized water system. The septic tank, so here's the road, the septic tank was right here, opposite side of the driveway. One way you can kill septic systems is driving across them, crushing them. So the tank was there, and I said, well, the leach field, and they go, up the hill there. And I'm like,
How do you pump it up there?
and I said, well, how does this work? And the septic guy was explaining it to me. He goes, that's a grinder system. It's a very small tank. Grinds it, it's on a timer. Every night, it grinds everything up, and it pumps it up the hill. And then it goes to the leach field. I said, so there's nothing to pump? He goes, very little. He goes, you can pump it if you want to.
So
He goes,
it's
big thing
taking
is it's got these filters, and you really need to change the filters once a year. Oh, okay. How much are the filters? $25. So that's not bad.
How much more does that type of system cost though?
Yeah, it was the only choice they had there, and it was expensive. And I said, well, how much does it cost for you to come out and change those filters? $25. I looked at my buyer and said, he goes, same thought. I'm gonna call you every year and put it on my calendar. I'm not gonna change that for $25. I'm like, me either. You gotta have gloves like this, and a mask, and a respirator. No, $25, you do it.
Deal.
I mean, the guys that do that have a sense of humor. There's one of the septic companies is called Honeybee. If you've ever been around the airlines, the little truck that goes around and flushes the toilets or cleans out the toilets in an airplane. I've used these, I've done these in my past life. They're called the Honey Wagon. It's Honeybee. One of them is Brown's Septic. I love that. It's the guy's real name, is Brown. And then the favorite one is on the back of the truck, says, call it what you want, it's my bread and butter. So they have a sense of humor. I guess you're dealing with that kind of stuff all day long, you gotta have it, okay? All right, any more questions about septics? This is where the water goes when it comes out of the ground, it goes back.
The only thing I would add, because I don't do them very often, is don't be afraid to talk to Ted.
Yeah.
Make sure you have that paragraph, and if you don't have it, get it from Ted to put in your contract when you write a contract for it, on the buy side or listing side.
Yeah.
And then either side, and when I take a listing and it has a septic, I make sure they get in touch with one of the contractors before we go on the market. So then that contract, because what they usually do, they're all so helpful, like Ted said.
Oh, yeah.
They'll call and the person that takes it like an Arrowhead, the lady who usually answers, she'll go, oh, you pull it up, and she pulls up all the information right there for the seller. Oh, and they can tell right away, ooh, that's gonna be hard to get to. If we have to replace your septic, we're gonna need a crane to put it over. I had one of those.
Yeah.
But they warned us up front, so the seller knew all of a sudden that we were gonna have that issue. If it had to be replaced, then it had to be replaced.
Well, when I did my house, I have a spot I don't like to use it very often, but a truck can back across the lawn to get over there. Because they have hoses. If they go to the extra hoses, cha-ching. They go to the extractor hose, it has to have another pump, cha-ching, cha-ching. So, you know, if it's out front and it's about this far from the driveway where the tank is and the leach field goes up, no problem. When you're in the country, you can usually spot the leach field as the sun's always green.
Yes.
Always. Grass is always greener over the septic.
I have a question, why are septic, so like my family all down in Florida, they have septic tanks. And why are they always raised up? Like
'Cause
there's
in
always
Florida-
that huge spot in your.
Because
is it
water.
just a lot
Because in
of-
Florida, your water
Okay.
table's like this.
So they can't.
I mean, you can almost get a 2x4 to root in Florida if you dig
Yeah.
it deep enough, cause there's water. I mean, I have my brother-in-law in Orlando put in a fence. We put the post in right away, because if we dug a post and came back the next morning, it was full of water.
Yeah.
So there, they have to do an engineered, which is called a mounded system in Florida,
Okay.
where they put it up, which means you probably have a lift pump, because you're pumping it up to get it into that above-ground septic system.
Okay, cause my sister has this nice, beautiful new build, huge, beautiful backyard, can't do crap with it because it's one giant hill.
Yeah. It's
So
the,
they
it's
can't
a
put a
mounted
pool or
system.
anything.
Yeah, the water table.
Yep, okay.
And that's what happened to that one where the leach field failed. Over the years, it kind of eroded, so the runoff
It was just too much water.
came across and went, suddenly their system was like it was in Florida, it was underwater.
Ted, when Eddie mentioned the paragraph that you used, can you send that out?
No, because I change it every time depending on the house.
Do you? Okay.
Yeah. I look at what's there.
I got one from him years ago, and I just tweak it every time to exactly.
Yeah,
I
'cause you
saved
wanna,
it and I tweak it.
you wanna change it, basically what you want,
Can you
what you
send
want.
it out?
What you
I'll
want to
just
say
send it
is,
Ted's
Then I
from-
know to tweak
This is
revised.
But that's good to know to tweak.
yeah,
Yeah.
seller, comma, at seller's expense,
Yes.
comma, shall have on or before the inspection, on or before the appraisal deadline. On or before the appraisal deadline, because a lot of times they can't get it done by inspection, but appraisal deadline. To have the septic system pumped and inspected by a county health department certified inspector and verified to be in safe, proper operating condition, and to have the county's mandated, you put that in,
Yeah,
mandated,
certificate.
certificate, transfer certificate issued in the buyer's name. You don't want it generic. Okay? Water, okay. A well is not a water right.
A well is what?
Is not a water right. A well is just a permit to put a giant straw in the ground and suck water out. It has very distinct parameters around a well permit. You're only allowed to go into certain aquifers, which change the depth that you can drill. You're only allowed to take out a specific amount of water in many cases. And you're also only allowed to use the water for specific things. Okay? So your well permit, like mine is, I'm in the Denver aquifer, which is below the Dawson. I'm 450 feet down. I'm allowed to pump up to 15 gallons per minute. My pump doesn't do that. That's a hell of a pump. I didn't want to spend that much money. And I'm allowed 3/4 of an acre foot of water. So an acre foot is an acre, which is how big?
560 square feet.
Yes.
God,
Always
you are
had-
good.
I've always had that number
It's
memorized. I
that
don't know
many.
why.
That many cubic feet of water. Okay? That's an acre foot is an acre 1 foot deep. Cubic foot of water is just a little over 7 gallons. So you can realize that that's nearly 300,000 gallons of water
That
You're not-
annually?
And how, that's a month or?
annually.
Annually.
Okay? New wells have to have a meter on it, and you have to take meter readings.
So if you go over that amount, do they just charge you extra, or
They
do they
slap
cut
your
you
hand.
off?
They slap your hand.
Jail.
Okay.
And yeah, and to a point they will fine you probably. I had a metered well, but I wasn't my first well was metered. My well now is an ancient well. But my first well had a meter on it. But I didn't ever get anything that said I needed to read with it. So every year between Christmas and New Year's, I'd go down and look at the meter, took a Sharpie and I wrote it on a 2x4 in the basement. If they said, where's your well log? We sold the house, said, here's your well log. What is that? Every year between Christmas and New Year's, first week in January, put a date down and write the reading. What's that for? Said if they come and audit you. Said if they want it, take a picture and email them the picture. There's my well log, permanent well log. Of course, those houses in Black Forest that burned down, they lost their well log. So a well is not a water right. Water rights can have rights to wells. And a water right is a defined usage of water with a legal description, okay? The most common one you run into if you do Pueblo, Alan Rest, remember this one, shares of the Bessemer ditch. It's a water ditch runs through Pueblo out to Avondale and out there. So the house out there had 3 shares of the Bessemer ditch. Well, how much water is that? Depends on the year, because they base it on the flow. 3 shares would get you, at the particular time, would get you 3 days a week, 3 hours of water pulled out of the ditch. And you have these big tubes you fill in, it siphons out. And so, but other ones will say you have the rights to the water below this property for the Denver, the Dawson aquifers, not to exceed X number of acre feet a year. And that's usually on a bigger parcel, 40 acres or better, where you see that. On the big parcels, like the agricultural parcel, you'll see it, you're gonna get the Laramie and the Replico Fox Hills, which are the deep wells. When you're in those communities that have a community well, they're down on those bottom 2 wells, because that's where you can pump large amounts of water out of.
When you said the wells, you said that you have a limit on how much you use and what you use it for. What do you mean by what you're using the water for?
Most of the new wells on parcels smaller than 35 acres are household. Household will look in there and you look at a well permit, it'll say household use only. So that means inside the house, no irrigation, no flower bed, no nothing. Now what you do is you get a rain barrel and you catch the rain, and then when nobody's looking, you fill the rain barrel up.
So like
That's
I
the
have a
truth.
sprinkler
Now that you
system.
can have rain barrels.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like I have a sprinkler system in my yard, so mine would have special permission for the,
Not if it was household.
cause it's a household.
Household is
Not like
for
a
the
large
use
irrigation.
inside one domestic residence.
Okay.
That's what it'll say. Then you'll see ones, the older ones, they don't do that so much now, but you'll see some of the older wells, household with animals, which means you can keep domestic animals. Dogs and cats are not considered, they're household pets. Domestic animals would be like horses, donkeys, any of the equine family. They've added into the equine, which I think is a mistake, because my horse hated llamas.
Really? I've seen a lot of people, like in Kansas, they have llamas.
Yeah, I mean, they shear them, but the thing is, they would say with the llamas, well, in South America, these are the same as donkeys. Yeah, but they're not an equine, they're not equine. And then anything, you don't shear a donkey, you don't shear a horse, you don't shear a mule. But you shear llamas. And then the alpaca guys got in there and said, well, these are just little llamas. No, they're a whole different thing. An alpaca is an absolute ugly goat.
Ugly.
Have you ever seen one spit at you? Yeah.
I've had one.
Get that little sucker out of here. No. But anyway, and with the exception in a lot of places for that is 4-H animals. Because they promote the kids with the 4-H animals. Once you get in older properties like mine, or you get up to 35 plus acres, you're getting a domestic well. Well, the domestic well allows for household use, watering of animals, and then they'll give you a square footage of irrigation. Mine says I get 3/4 of an acre foot, I can do domestic animals, and I can irrigate 3,500 square feet of outside landscaping. So you look at that. So you see a place has horses, look at the well, and nothing in the well says they can have horses. Ask questions. I asked questions on that with one of my buyers. The guy goes, oh, we have a cistern out there for the horses. Oh, so you buy water? Yeah. How much water do you buy? Oh, we buy a couple times a year, just so the county doesn't care. So why do you get the rest of the water? He goes, the home's in the middle of the night. So, country people do what country people do, but make sure you understand what your people are getting. You don't wanna be the one that says, you know, go ahead and put the hose out there just like they did, and the neighbor turns them in because they like, you know, John and Mary Doe, but they don't like Bob and Mary Smith. So they turn the new people in. So don't.
When you were talking about the shares in a ditch.
Yeah.
How is that transferable in a real estate transaction?
Okay, if you have a water right, you get, you know, 20% of the flow of the Black Squirrel Creek. That is a defined, legal description. It's transferred with a deed.
Is it through the title work then?
Title companies don't do, water deeds. Typically, you can talk them into it, but they won't insure over waters. They'll prepare it for you and they'll.
So who does
But-
that?
So who?
A water attorney.
Water attorneys.
Water attorneys.
And if you think a F. Lee Bailey is expensive, water attorneys are the most expensive attorneys I've found. Because you can't go anywhere else. You can shop around for divorce attorneys, you can shop around for accident between Frank Azar, Hoyser and Hoyser. No, water attorneys, small little niche, they know everybody. Every one of them knows everybody, it's a little fraternity. If you're a buyer, you would ask for a bargain and sale deed, which conveys a little bit more teeth. If you're a seller, you're gonna do it quickly. Just here, these are the rights. This is what we had, this is what you get from us. We don't guarantee anything about it. There's no insurance, title insurance over water deed transfers. You're just there.
On a property up in Teller County in the middle of nowhere.
That's a lot of talk.
The description the agent put in the MLS said that you get a share in the, water company.
Mhm.
So getting a well would not be a problem at all? What's that supposed to mean?
Here's the deal, if a well is the last resort water, that share is, there's probably a community water system there,
Okay.
and each owner has a share in it. And the reason they do it that way is because you have a voting right for one vote for your household. If you have access to water another way, you can't get a well. Now, if you have a well and you get city water, a couple of places around here that are that way.
Yeah, it's in,
The little area over there by the dog track over there, when we were on water restrictions last time, you go through it and you see every third or fourth house had this beautiful green lawn. In the window was a big sign that said, well water. Those people had wells, they're little shallow wells, they're only 150 feet down. Little bitty wells. They could use them for water, they're long. They can't use them for in-house use because they're on city water, because the wells are not safe apparently. But they could use them water. So, and I always wondered if somebody, city water, put a sign up there, but I'm sure they're metering people's water in that hotel. And the same thing happened over in Falcon Estates over there, behind where the Home Depot and all that construction went in. A lot of those houses had wells, they converted to city water, they're still on septics. And they were acre lots. If you kept continuous, domestic animals on there, horses, donkeys, mules, they were grandfathered in. So a lot of people there didn't want to have the expense of a horse, they bought donkeys. Donkeys don't eat much, they're tough as a boot, they live 35 years, they don't eat you out of house and home, and they're kind of cute. But that would kept them so that somebody could have a horse there. Okay?
So, like up in the Broadmoor, there's a lot of houses that have well water signs.
Mhm.
Is that just for their outdoor water?
Yeah.
Probably.
Not the domestic water?
No, I think they probably run a lot of those, they run water into them. And they've kept those wells just for that reason, so that they can maintain their landscaping in a drought. But they're sucking up all the water for us people to do that. No.
But if they have that well, Ted, they can access that water anytime, can't they?
They're
Not
just not
just
supposed to
during
use,
the
they're just not supposed to use it in their house. Once they connect to the city water, they're not supposed to use it in their house.
Right.
If the well goes dry, they have to drill another one, they're not gonna get the permit to do that. And well permits only started being issued in about 1972. You'll find houses built in the 60s that have wells and they don't have a permit. It's a non-conforming well or unpermitted well.
What year did you say the permits were?
72 is about the time they started. So they have an old well. Question arises, do you want that permitted? It's up to your buyer. Because then they have to live with what restrictions the state puts on them. Me, personally, I'd leave it till the well failed and had to be re-drilled.
But if they wanted it permitted, they would have to get an entire new well put in?
No, you could get, you know, in what justification would be if you were on 2.5 acres and you had horses, so for the last 60 years, this property has been used as horse property with this well. I will permit the well if you will give me a domestic permit or a household permit with irrigation and animals. Oh, we can't do that. Never mind. So you have to apply for a permit to get one. They don't just give you one. So when it comes to finding permits, many of you have come to me to try to find permits. It is you look at the Colorado Department of Water Resources. That's the website. You just Google it, it pops up. And it is the most convoluted, backwards searching website I have ever seen. Eddie, you've done this, you know it is.
Yeah, I can never find it.
Yeah, you go through there. You know, there's several ways. The best way, if you have the permit, you look on every past listing for that house. You know, if it's been sold 4 times, you look at and see if any one of those put the permit number in, because that's the easiest way. You can search by name. But the problem is, you know, what was it, like 8 years ago? The state came out and revised the closing instructions, where there's a line, a little section in the closing instructions says, if this property is served by a well, the title company will submit the proper well transfer paperwork. That was like 8 or 9 years ago. Before then, people said nobody thought about it. You know, and there's no justification for it. You know, Ricky and I could go start having some cocktails and filling out well transfer forms and transfer 200 wells into our names. You know, and nobody knows. They just send them in. They might catch us if we're using the same name all the time. But yeah, and they catch Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck. But people weren't transferring the wells, so that's why they stuck that with the title company, so that you can search more easily to find the name. But oftentimes, if this is the first transfer, it may be in the contractor that was building the house. He applied for the well and put it in, and he didn't switch it into the owner's name. I tracked back, found the contractor that built a house and found out that the well was in. I tracked him down and got the well transferred. The thing about it is the seller doesn't have to transfer it. The buyer transfers into their name. So if you can't find the seller that Uncle Fester died 30 years ago, it doesn't matter, because you'll just put it in your name. You know? But, so you can look by name, and that's done, and it's gonna get you. You can look by address, but addresses are also funky to find. Subdivision, if the subdivision names match up exactly what the state has and what the subdivision is. So you're really gonna wanna look off of tax records for the subdivision, because that's how it typically is with the state. Not what it's known as. Like we always call Latigo Trails. The actual legal name is The Trails. It's not Latigo Trails, it's The Trails. So you gotta know what you're doing with the thing. And then the last resort is section, township, and range. Yeah, or township, section, range. You know, if you go to like Realist, if you click on Realist, Eddie's done this, I've shown Eddie how to do it. You go in there and it's got that on there, you plug that in. And then you'll start seeing houses pop up with wells. And you can triangulate where you are. It's like, okay, wait a minute, that's the person that's across the street. So then you go back, this is it, you find like, well, who the hell is that? Oh yeah, that was the contractor that built the house and put it in his name. And this is the third owner, it's never been transferred. So, and if you're doing that, come check with me because I'll show you it's not as much science as it is art about finding those. It's almost like how the guys find the wells by using the willows thing. All right, now, once you get to the point and you find the permit, you want to print everything that they have. You want the application for the permit. You want the actual permit. You want the driller's report. You want anything that shows if the well has been changed, modified, new pump, whatever. That'll all show up in there because you want that for your people. When you're looking at the well permit and the driller's report's gonna give you all that. Because you get the permit, tells you where to put it, and the driller's report tells you where they drilled it and how deep they drilled it. So you wanna say, okay, the well was drilled to 350 feet. Water surged to 110. It dropped back down and the static level was 150. The drilling company set the well at 330 feet. Not the last 20 feet where all the it gets turned up. So then you know, okay, I have from 150 to 330. I have 180 feet of water. So you have a column of 180 feet of water. That's good. Maximum pumping allowed on these permits, 15 gallons a minute. It's gonna say that their pumping level was 11 gallons a minute at the time they tested it. So that's all good, okay? Understand that a well is not like the straw inside this, and I'm sucking from the bottom up. A well is though you put a straw inside a sponge. When you start sucking water out of that, it doesn't pull from the bottom up, it's pulling alongside that straw, and then it drops back. This thing is the recovery rate. How quick, after you stop pumping, does the water seep back in around the pipe? You can stress a well and find out that is when it runs out of water. Some of the well testing companies will do that. I would rather that not be done to my well. Just don't think so. So when you get to the house for an inspection, so like I said, you want to know depth of the well, where the pump's sitting, and where the static level of water is what your column is. So if you have a 200-foot well, the pump sits at 190 feet, and the static level is at 100, you only got a little bit of water to work with. So you can get that recovery thing behind you. So always look at that and make sure there's plenty there. And then you get to the house, you want to do a flow test. The easiest one is the bucket test. The highest flowing location on a house is a water faucet, outside water faucet. They're just a straight pipe out. What you do is you put a 5-gallon bucket in there, look at your watch, turn it on. How quickly does it take to fill up that 5-gallon bucket? If it takes 3 or 4 minutes, you're in trouble. Because you can spit quicker than that. What you want to do, you want that bucket to fill up quicker than a minute. Most of the houses in Colorado Springs, the flow rate is between 6 and 9. 6 on the low end, 9 on the high end. It's just how the city regulates the water and how they throttle it down. And you have to, you want to make sure it's running better for your sprinkler systems. That's why your sprinkler system comes off first. It's taking first water. It gets all the good pressure. So, you want to do a pressure test, make sure you got 40 to 50 PSI. Much over 60 will damage faucets, like they do in the city, they throttle it down. The ideal thing is between 6 and 8 gallons per minute. There's places out in the country where you get 1 to 3 gallons. Can you imagine trying to dance around the shower and catching all the drops? Most of those places have a cistern, which is the clean cousin of a septic tank. Doesn't have the baffle, just a big tank, but what fills in, and then it has a pressure relief pump like what's in a motorhome. You turn the valve open, the pump kicks in, and then what they do is they refill at night. So they're getting that 2 gallons a minute all night, fills the thing up. The next day you've got plenty of water. And you'll see some have a chlorine injection to make sure the water's clean. And then right beside it, you see a Costco box with 1 gallon to 2 gallon jugs of bleach. So they fill this little injection thing and it just dribbles chlorine in the water. But, so you look for that. Now, you always want to test the water. And the test that you're looking for is the potability test. The potability test is looking for bacteria. Coliform and E. coli are the major bacteria they're looking for. Those are human waste bacteria that can cause severe intestinal issues and death, diarrhea leading to death. It's not very pleasant, but that's what they're looking for. They're looking for bacterial organisms. That's the common test. This is what they used to look like when you picked them up from the county, as little jars. I went by yesterday. I went by and picked up some tests. They've gotten cheap at the county because they gave me 2 forms that were all wrinkled up in this bag that I made copies of. The first page is what you fill out when you take the test. The second page is the instructions on how to take the test. And if you have an issue, you can go get the other instruction sheet that tells you how to shock a well. But these, you can only have, there's a little bit of powder in there. Don't rinse them out. Put the water in. The suggestion is you go to an outside faucet, you take a little wet wipe, alcohol wet wipe, wipe out the faucet, turn the water on, let it run for a little bit, turn it off, fill that jar up to the line. There's a line on it. Don't shake it, don't mess with it, just fill it up, cap it. You have to get it to the county's office over here in Garden of Gods within 24 hours when you take the sample. Keep it out of the light, keep it out of the heat, don't let it freeze. But it goes through all that. And you only turn it into them Monday through Thursday. Because you drop it in on Monday, you get the results on Tuesday. Tuesday, Wednesday, then Thursday, on Friday. They're open on Friday, but they're not taking tests because they can't process them. And you have that 24-hour window. Okay? If it comes back and there's bacteria there, come see me. Because what you need to do then is called shocking the well.
I had a client that had to do it twice and taken fines about 5 years ago.
I did it one time because we're running late. I
Twice.
have to do it. I was out with the buyer's agent. We had our cars out there at 10 at night. The light showing on the well. We took the well apart, poured in the gallon of bleach, let it sit for the prescribed time, pumped water through the entire house till you could smell chlorine. Actually, you run it on the outside hose till you can smell chlorine. Then you would run all the faucets till you can smell chlorine. Do you know that after smelling chlorine for 10, 15 minutes, you can't smell it anymore? So we would take turns sniffing the chlorine.
So you're basically just bleaching your entire system.
You're bleaching the entire system. And then you have to let it sit there for 24 hours. Then you turn on the faucet again and you pump it till you can't smell chlorine again, which for me was about 12 minutes. Once you get where you can't smell chlorine, then you run all the others till you can't smell it. So pretty soon you're just letting water run thinking, it's gotta be done. And that's what you do. And then you retest.
So for that 24 hours it sits, they can't use any of the water in their house?
Oh, they can,
Oh.
but you gotta get it through there.
Okay.
But you can't start flushing it for 24 hours. And they're not gonna run enough water in a normal house overnight
Flush the system.
to flush the system. We're talking, when I did mine at the house of men, outside faucet ran for 2.5 hours before I was fairly certain didn't have chlorine.
So shocking, the well is not expensive, it's just a pain.
It's a pain. Yeah, it's all that time, all electricity to run the pump and a gallon of bleach. So, but if you go to that point, talk to me and go get the rules and regulations. Now, if you have somebody that is the engineer type and really wants to know what's in their water, Colorado State University, the other CSU, not the utility people, they have a test kit. I saw one years ago, and it's a box, and it's several bottles, and you take them from different places, and you send it to them, and it's a couple of weeks, they send it back. I mean, they test for pesticides, heavy metals, radon, make sure there's no lead in the water, no arsenic, any kind of minerals. They test, I mean, it's like 40 or 50 things they test for. If you really, really want to know, you test that. Most of us rather live fat, dumb, and happy and not worry about it. Because as realtors, once you know, you gotta tell them. Same thing with radon. I don't test my houses. I don't have anybody live in the basement. So don't you wanna know? No. Rather not. Something else I gotta tell somebody. All right. We're a little over now. Any other questions?
Thanks. The only thing I would add about the water tests and shocking the system and stuff, it's something that you should try and do with your client. You should try and have your client do it. And if they aren't willing to do it or whatever, you have to participate and make sure they're there. If they're not, then you need to make sure you have some kind of documentation video doing it or something, because you're assuming all kinds of risks that if you run the test and it comes back that everything's good and then they all get sick,
Yeah.
you
And
can
they
have a
said,
lot of
oh,
trouble.
Eddie just went in the bathroom and took the test. And another thing too,
So having the retest come back good is not enough, like,
I would just, it is, as long as your client is the one doing it.
Yeah.
You should help them, you can tell them where to get them, or you can go get these kids, hand them to them.
So
Well,
when
some of the home inspectors will do it. Some
I
of
was
the
just
home-
gonna say, when I had one, it was the well inspector did it and the home inspector, like, you had to pay a little extra, but I was like,
It's worth it, yeah.
it's worth it. I mean, it
Well,
wasn't much.
They did it to the county.
and with
they did it
some
Yeah.
lenders, FHA and VA loans, it has to be a third party, a disinterested party. So it can't be
you said for FHA.
FHA and VA. The buyer and the buyer's agent can't do it, the seller and the seller's agent can't do it.
Okay.
I'm gonna be doing one for Liz, she's out of town, I asked Jim, am I considered a disinterested party? He says, you're not a party in the country, even though we work in the same office.
It's cause you're not very
You're not
interested.
party to
I'm not a party to the country. I party, but I'm not a party to the country.
And I had to step out for just a minute, did you go over that the VA requires different well tests sometimes than regular well tests?
Sometimes, but mostly what FHA and VA look for is a potability test. Sometimes they would like to see a flow pressure test, is the only thing I've seen them ask for.
How is that?
Which you should be doing anyway. Your
Right.
inspectors carry pressure gauges. Hook it up to an outside faucet. Okay, you've got 45 PSI. And the best, for any house,
Yeah.
the best definitive answer, do you have enough water, is you go into the bathroom, you turn on the shower, you turn on the sink, and you flush the toilet, and stick your hand in there and go, yeah, I could shower in that. Because that's, at the end of the day, that's what you want. Now, I've seen some of them turn on the faucet in the kitchen, turn on the faucet in a tub in the other room, and then turn on the faucet in the shower in the master, and then flush the toilet, put the rain in. If all that works and you still got enough water to take a shower with, you're good.
Is it normal for a basement to have less pressure than the main level?
Only if they turned it back somehow, not normally.
Cause like my main level in my house has great water pressure, but the shower in the basement, I couldn't wash my hair in it.
You should take the head off, there might be something.
Yeah.
with the
That's
head.
it, it's lead that VA requires that like a conventional loan doesn't
Might have
need,
water.
it's a lead test for
Is
the
it
well.
shower with that?
Or the
VA
lead.
has-
That's
yes.
going to a specific test.
and it takes a lot longer of a lead test, so you wanna know that going in, that they require it.
Was that lender specific or
It
VA?
took like 20 days to get back, yeah.
Carmen,
That's
is it-
Ponderosa was the last one I had that they did that, yeah.
And that's
Was it
typically,
lender
that's gonna
specific
be
or
typical.
Well, I have found that it's lender specific.
That's what I
Yes.
thought.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and Veterans United, they will make you do it no matter
Every
what.
single time,
Is
okay.
it dependent on the age of the house?
Carmen, so did
No.
you have your, was it shared cost, or who pays the cost of that?
The buyer.
The buyer, okay.
That's an
The
inspection.
buyer's
cost.
loan.
So, yeah. Ted,
Now,
what-
does, Carmen, is that dependent on the age of the house, or was every house?
Well, I've only had a couple of Veterans United, deals, so I don't really know. This house wasn't that old, it's like 99 or something.
My guess it was probably an older house.
She said it was
I think it's lender, cause I had a VA one and they did not require that.
Really?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so-
Veterans United are sticklers for that.
It was not veterans.
Okay.
And then they make you also send in the well invoice, the invoice for the well test.
Oh, okay. Good to know. I've not
I
had
hate
this.
Veterans United.
You know, and the thing is,
Yeah, I think
if you have, a house in the city that's built in the sixties, it could have lead in it because of the type of piping you used.
Right.
All the soldered joints, now the new houses all have plastic pipe.
Does the cistern, do you have to have that inspected, permit up, that's fine?
No.
Nothing like that?
You probably would want somebody to look in it and make sure that it's not green.
What does that mean?
Nice.
Algae- Algae growing.
Algae green.
And then you just go in there with that bottle of bleach and just pour it in there.
Well, thank you, Ted, appreciate it.
Yes.
Really good.
If you need to have one of those for reference, like I said, the old ones were nice and neat, but if you wanna grab a bottle and